Hello, Louisa Jewell here with your weekly juice. So I have a friend who needs to deal with something but just keeps putting it off. And it made me think about how procrastination affects our lives. Now, Tim Pychyl, who's a leading researcher on procrastination, he defines procrastination as giving in to feel good now. So if you think about that definition of procrastination, it's really about self-regulation failure, right? We want to feel good now, put off the bad feelings until later. However, we think we're putting off the bad feelings about doing the task, but we're really not, because even though we might be putting it off to the future, we're still anxious about it. We still know we have to do it. We feel guilty that we're not getting to it. So it still carries a mental load even when we are procrastinating. We think we're making it better, but we're really not, right? So here's another thing about procrastination. It can actually make things worse. So for example, I had a friend who was going to do something for me and I didn't want to ask her because I didn't want to burden her. So I kept putting it off and putting it off. But then by putting it off and putting it off, I was getting closer and closer to my deadline, and it actually now has affected the project. Once I finally did ask her and it got done and she was gracious to help me out, it now is putting the project at risk because I procrastinated. So sometimes we think, oh, I'll put it off and it'll be fine if I do it tomorrow, but it actually can make your future decisions worse or your future worse, right? So what can we actually do to reduce procrastination? So the first thing is, if procrastination is about giving in to feel good now, then we need to change our emotions around the task. So, first of all, if you don't know why you're procrastinating, you might get curious about what are your emotions. Like, why am I procrastinating? I mean, I remember I was procrastinating something with a client on a particular contract. My lawyer had come back and said, look, these clauses need to change. Now, I was already happily working with this client and I didn't want to kind of rock the boat. I didn't realize that's why I was procrastinating. It wasn't until I stopped, examined my emotions, and I thought, wow, I don't want to wreck the relationship. So then I went back and asked the lawyer to go back and deal with it. But what I'm trying to get at is we can't tame our emotions around something until we can name it. So get curious about, why am I procrastinating? What are the emotions around it? And how can I change the emotions around it? The other thing is that if you're procrastinating on something that does have a huge emotional load, think about, can you ask a friend to help you? So for example, I had to do something that was really emotional for me and I kept putting it off. And finally, a friend said to me, why don't I do it with you? And she just came in on Zoom and we did it together. And it was so nice to have her there beside me to talk it through before I did it, to be there afterwards. And it's not a bad strategy to have somebody go through it with you, a trusted friend. Now, another reason why we procrastinate is that sometimes we just find the task too overwhelming. Like, oh, write my book, right? Well, what does that mean, write my book? Like, there are a million tasks associated with writing a book. So the strategy there is break it down into smaller tasks, manageable tasks. And then maybe every week or every 2 weeks, you're going to work on each one of those tasks. It makes things a lot easier. Now, another reason why we procrastinate is because sometimes the task is just too abstract. So for example, oh, I'm going to get into shape. I'm going to get into shape. I'm going to get into shape. Well, what does that mean? I'm going to get into shape. It's not concrete enough. Instead, if we say, I would like to run 3 days a week, right? I'd like to start doing more cardio, right? Or I'd like to do cardio 3 times a week. Whatever it is, try to make it much more concrete. Then you will be more likely to get into the action of it. And finally, one of the number one reasons why we procrastinate is our need for perfectionism. We want to be perfect right out of the gate. So if we don't know how to be perfect, or we're not sure we're going to be perfect, then we might procrastinate, especially if our perfectionism is around, trying to live up to other people's standards. We're certainly going to be kind of afraid to engage in that particular task if we don't think that we can be perfect. So, I remember my editor for my book kept saying to me, Louisa, done is better than good. And I was like, what? It is? I thought it always had to be good and great and perfect. And finally, when she said that, I was like, okay, I'll just get it done and get it into her. And then she made it perfect by editing it, and it was all good. So I think that perfectionism can get in the way if we don't know how we can show up perfectly. We may be stopping ourselves from doing something. In next week's Juice, I'm going to share one of my greatest tips from my book about how to combat those feelings of perfectionism. So I hope this helps, and I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm going to do my next weekly Juice right now. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Great to see you. We'll see you next week.